Welcome to another episode of the Tobago House of Assembly's Post-Executive Council Media Briefing. This week, the Chief Secretary Kelvin Charles addresses the media.
A delegation from Trinidad and Tobago attended the 40th Annual General Meeting of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank. The Tobago segment of the delegation included your humble servant, as well as the coordinator of the planning unit of the Office of the Chief Secretary, Mr. Bobby Andrews, as well as my security detail. We had preliminary discussions with international financial institutions. The IADB, which is the Inter-American Development Bank, the CDB, Caribbean Development Bank, and EIB, European Investment Bank. And these were preliminary discussions. And these discussions were aimed at pursuing the option of seeking financing for a number of projects, well, both for Trinidad and Tobago. I will focus on Tobago. And the discussions surrounded a coastal protection program for stabilization at Milford Road, a coastal erosion mitigation and protection at Pigeon Point, Thompson Bridge construction, relocation of the Scarborough Secondary School, construction of a technical, vocational, and training center at Roxborough, and waste management options for recycling and landfill management. Now, the first 5 projects are what we will, at this time, place in our draft estimates for development program for fiscal 2019. As well as we will undertake to partner with the Ministry of Planning to develop the project details and portfolio for the bank's consideration. Now, I am emphasizing that it is preliminary discussions, and these banks do not finance 100% of the projects. Once approval is conveyed, they approve a particular percentage, and the host country, in this case Trinidad and Tobago, would have to find the balance. And that is why we, this time, will be placing these projects into our draft estimates with a view to see what funding may be available. In some instances, it may be for preliminary designs and so on. In other instances, it might be to carry out the works. I wish to advise as well that there were other areas that we explored in respect of technical assistance, and those areas include, but are not limited to, one, a review of our protocols for disaster mitigation and response, because as you are aware, we are in the hurricane season, and we just have to cast our minds back to see the kind of damage that these natural disasters can do. Grenada was devastated by Hurricane Ivan some years ago. We would want to ensure that our protocols are sufficiently robust that if we are impacted significantly, heaven forbid, that we can demonstrate the kind of resilience and come back as quickly as possible that would be required. And therefore, what we would try to do at our level is to ensure that our protocols are at the level they should be at a time like this. Because, you know, and I had made the point some time ago, if the port were to be destroyed, then the real challenge of our feeding ourselves would become acute. And that was why during that crisis, I had indicated that we needed to look at the crisis as an opportunity to recognize that we are too dependent on outside products coming in, and we need to become more inward-looking in our attempt to ensure that we can produce things for ourselves. Building economic competitiveness is another area that we explored, and in fact, I would have taken the opportunity to say to the executive of the CDB that they can expect a formal invitation from the Chief Secretary for a delegation to come to Tobago to have serious conversations with the Executive Council. Now, I would have just hinted about the review of our disaster protocols, and a team headed by TEMA would immediately begin to review those protocols that currently exist in respect of disaster mitigation. We are also moving to develop those detailed plans and studies that I hinted a while ago to complete our portfolios for the Ministry of Finance and Planning, because CDB would not lend Tobago directly. It would have to come through the Ministry of Finance. And of course, the case has to be made in conjunction with the Ministry of Planning, because they lend to sovereign countries. Capacity building and training for delivery and competitiveness in the public and private sector. As I indicated, our formal requests will go to the bank to engage in conversations, because the truth be told, as we seek greater autonomy, then we must ensure that our people have the capacity to take control of the management of this island. And traffic and public transportation arrangements and modalities for Tobago is another area that we will be seeking some level of technical assistance on. Now, that is as far as reporting on the trip goes. Now, I'm taking the opportunity to bring you up to date on some of the plans in respect of construction. As you are aware, there is the Roxborough Administrative Complex that is ongoing, and my information that at this time it is about 55% complete, and we are hoping that completion would be before the end of this year. Bell Garden Community Center upgrade, that is ongoing. And again, I understand that is about 60% complete. And again, that should be delivered, all things being equal, by the end of the financial year. The Codler Hall Administrative Complex expansion, where you happen to be. The status of this project is that it is in the process where tenders are being evaluated, and all the tenders have been submitted by registered Tobago contractors, and the award is expected before the end of this month. With a completion date projected of July next year, once everything is in place and once the tenders are awarded on time. Now, there are 4 schools, primary schools, that are currently under construction, and interestingly, they are all at about 98% completed. And that's the Hope Anglican Primary School, the Patience Hill Government Primary School, the Signal Hill Government Primary School and the Wim Anglican Primary School. So that our intention is to seek to ensure that these schools are available, or these additional premises are available by the start of the new school term. Because at 98% completion, before the end of this month, they should all be completed. Now, PRDI, which is the Policy Research and Development Institute, that building, we have decided that we will refurbish that building and therefore make it available for accommodation for public servants, because at this time it is not functional. Now, packages are currently being prepared for tender, and these packages should be available to be issued again by the 4th week of June. Now, once everything goes well, we expect that this project should not take more than 6 months. The Moriah Health Center, again, this project is in the tender stage, and tenders are to be issued by the middle of this month. All things being equal, thereafter, the project should be commencing by August 2018. Now, there's a Wim sports facility. This tender stage has been completed, and the expectation is that the contractor will be mobilized on site before the end of this month. Now, what I've just done, ladies and gentlemen, is to point out to you some of the construction activities. And of course, I did not mention the 2 police stations that have been done under the auspices of the Ministry of National Security. What we need to recognize is that things are happening in the island of Tobago. And in fact, as we ramp up our construction activity, it is expected that our contractors will be positively engaged, as well as those persons who are currently unemployed but with the requisite skills will be engaged. What that will do ultimately is that for the construction services sector, one will find that there is an increase in activity which will reflect itself in the growth of Tobago's GDP. And the growth of Tobago's GDP is in effect contributing to the growth of national GDP. And one of the ways in which you measure the progress of an economy, that has to do with the growth in your overall GDP. So that in a very real sense, the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, and indeed of Tobago, has begun to get itself out of the throes of a recessionary period that we would have been experiencing. That doesn't mean, however, that we will not continue to husband and manage our resources in a particular way. Nor does it mean that there would be a phenomenal increase in budgetary allocations. So I'm making that abundantly clear. We still have to work hard. We still have to do more with less. But what we are seeking to do is to ensure that the island continues on its development path. The other issue which I wish to treat with very briefly, ladies and gentlemen, has to do with a view that has been suggested that the Friendship lands can be used as an option for siting of the terminal building. And in some instances, some people are actually touting for a new airport at that area. First of all, let me make it abundantly clear that not all the lands at Friendship are state-owned or owned by the THA. There is private ownership as well. And therefore, even if that were a viable option, significant acquisition of private acreages will have to be executed by the state to provide adequate space for construction of a new terminal building and runway. And indeed, what needs to be said very forcefully is that if a terminal building were to be constructed at Friendship, it would require one of two things: an extension of the current runway or the construction of a new runway with all its attendant implications. And where the terminal is to be sited would require no extension to the runway. Any extension to the runway would mean that the runway would pass through those wetlands, and that in itself poses a series of challenges, because first of all, one has to get clearance from EMA. And if one were to be able to do that, then the cost of construction is almost prohibitive, because then you will have to, among other things, drive a set of piles. And then you'll have to engage in what you call mitigating measures to protect the wetlands. So that is a no-no. One of the things also we need to bear in mind is that there are certain species of birds common to forested areas, and these pose significant threat to aircraft engines. I am sure that you would have heard on previous occasions where aircrafts taking off in Piaco had to turn back because they would have sucked birds into the engine. So these birds pose a tremendous risk to safety. And therefore, situating an airport in the near environs of a location such as that, dominated by these species of birds, will pose, as I say, risks to aircraft during taxi, takeoff, and landing. The implication also is that if you were to clear that area, it means that you would be involved in tremendous deforestation. In the age of conservation and the role of the environment for sustainability, such an approach is not advisable. In addition, there are noticeable clusters of protected tree species, I understand and I'm advised, in key areas of that land. It has been said as well that saline impacts will significantly increase maintenance costs, including repairs to terminal building, the runway, and even to ancillary services. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the technical reasons why a favorable consideration could not have been given to siting the new terminal building at Friendship. And may I advise you that what the information I'm giving you, we shall provide you with that information subsequently, because it's information that we will need the public to be aware of. And again, let me take this opportunity to reiterate what I said earlier this week, that it is the intention of the Tobago House of Assembly to treat fairly and equitably with those persons who will be displaced by the expansion of the airport facilities with respect to the construction of a new terminal building with appropriate ramps and car park, as well as positioning the airport in the context of the master plan that I spoke about earlier in the week, so that Tobago can seamlessly develop its aerodrome facilities and activities over the next 30, 40, and 50 years without having to revisit an exercise such as this one. The Executive Council would have also taken a decision today to, as I hinted earlier in the week, to have NIDCO engage in feasibility in respect of an integrated road network for Scarborough in an attempt to treat with the ongoing issue of traffic congestion, as well as to ensure that there is relative ease of access and egress to and from the capital city.
And I know that you have a drive to diversify Tobago's economy with focus on agriculture
and tourism.
And tourism, well,
principally.
To bolster tourism and to expand via agriculture. There was a team that was created to come up with a plan, and they submitted the plan, but there's an implementation team to come that is supposed to implement the plan. Can you give us an update on the activities of that team?
Well, there is not an implementation team per se, because you know that there is a division of food production with a public service, and I do not intend to create a parallel public service. However, what I propose to do and what I did so far is that I would have created a standing committee on food production, which I chair. We would have had one meeting so far, and persons would have been directed in particular ways, so as to ensure that the plans we have are progressing in a manner that they ought to progress. But it is not to create a special implementation team, so that the agricultural division, in conjunction with those special purpose companies that are related to agriculture, because you may recall that in coming into office, there were some companies that we placed under, that were hitherto elsewhere, that we placed under agriculture. For example, the cassava company. And the cassava company, along with the division, would have been in collaboration. And they produced this set of activities that were finally concluded on Tuesday in terms of Grow Tobago, Eat Tobago. Now, that is the kind of thing that I'm encouraging, because I don't want at all to say you have a special team implementing. We have all those people that your taxpaying dollars are paying. We have to start to work. I think as well, next week, there will be a graduation of those students at Kendall Farm School. And I'm working feverishly to ensure that not too long after that, those who are genuinely interested will be given access to land so they can immediately begin the process of agriculture production. And indeed, to the extent that they need some level of soft financing, that will be made available to them. Yes, I can say to you as well that in conversation with the Agricultural Development Bank, they have an interesting program for young entrepreneurs, and we would tap into that as the case may be.
In terms of the residents who have to move at Crown Point, any compensation package has been agreed upon to the tune of?
Well, you know, you can't do that for very practical reasons. And I'm happy you asked that question, because there are some who believe that you could throw out a figure out there. Now, we would have said that we would, the negotiation would be conducted on a one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And some persons would have countered and saying it's because we have something up our sleeve and so on. That is trite thinking. The simple fact of the matter is, let me use a practical example. So that James Thomas owns a piece of land without structure. Yes? Austin Calendar also owns a piece of land without structure. Now, James Thomas lives either in Trinidad or out of the country. James Thomas is not interested, especially if you're living out of the country, let's say in returning to Tobago. And all James Thomas wants is the cash for his land. So, you know that by sitting with James Thomas and talking to him on a one-on-one. The other individual may have inherited the property from his parents, but is about, or sometime in the not too distant future, would like to get married and raise a family, and therefore would be interested in either an equivalent parcel of land, or, depending on the circumstances, a parcel of land, even if it is not of equivalent size and value, but another parcel of land and some level of financing. No, you can't do that on a generic basis. It has to be treating with the needs of the person. That is why I stress the word, I didn't only say fairly, I said equitably, which means that you can't treat unequals equally if you want to be fair. Because if you treat unequals equally, all you do is perpetuate the inequality. So equitable is to ensure that your peculiar circumstances are taken into consideration. And that is why that approach is going to be taken. And the truth be told, it is only at a particular stage where we would legally be able to enter the lands and to perform roles such as surveying and valuing the property. And it's on the basis of those, because you could establish clear boundaries and so on, and what the market rate is. And in fact, our people have been saying that we would compensate at market rate. So that, but I suspect that some of these would have gotten lost in the emotion, and we understand that. But the intention really is to treat fairly, and indeed I think as the institution in Tobago, we have, and in fact I consider it that way, a duty of care to our people living here.
Thank you for staying with us for the Tobago House of Assembly's Post-Executive Council Media Briefing for the week ending June 9th, 2018.